Welcome back. You are watching The Core and we are discussing restructuring. Now remember, if you are at home and you want to be part of this conversation, you can tweet your questions and comments and we will do our very best to make sure that we share them on this program. The details are to be found scrolling. Now, I want us to start getting into sort of the specifics of restructuring, particularly in the way it is viewed by different people. Earlier, you talked about state creation as something that you thought was an imperative, particularly for your region.
In one hand.
Yes. Now, the Governor El-Rufai's committee that, did the restructuring work for APC, part of the recommendation they rejected was that of state creation, saying that actually they think it will make things more complicated. And apart from, when you talked about the confab in which you took part, and there was like a consensus that, the East should get another state. As I understand it, another 18 states were also proposed. And so my question to you is that, given what we've heard Dr. Akin talk about the sort of size of government and how it's unwieldy and very expensive, do you honestly, realistically believe that adding more states is what Nigeria needs?
Well, I'm not saying that we should add many more states. I'm talking about, first of all, maintaining a proper balance on the basis of equity and justice. Since these states have been created by the military in the past, a zone that has 5 states should be given 6 states. And the people there will now feel, yes, if there was any reason they had 5 states before, that has been compensated for. And they now have 6 states. We have 6 zones here, 6 states, all the other zones, 1 northwest, 7 states. That is on one hand, if we are going to continue with states. Then in the alternative, return to regional arrangement will cure most of these challenges we're talking about, size of government and all that. Because if we go by that basis now, we'll be talking about having 6 zones. Now that we have 6 zones, 3 here, 3 here, that's 6. So if we can return to regional arrangement, we'll have 6 regions. That will reduce the size of government we have. But what is very critical in what we are discussing about this restructuring is how to reduce the concentration of powers on the federal government. The federal government has appropriated so much to itself, devolution of powers, and how to make these 6 zones that people have proposed to function in a manner that the economy will be better managed, jobs will be created for our unemployed youths, Because when we had regional arrangement, there was a healthy competition. Even if you don't call it competition, every zone, every region concentrated on activities it had comparative advantage.
Okay, now to try and get a sense of how easy it is to be able to make the changes that are necessary. Earlier today, we were lucky enough to have Nigeria's Deputy Senate President, Senator Ike Ekweremadu. He came into our studios and my colleague Ajuri Ngelele spoke to him. He asked him whether from the point of view of the National Assembly, to what extent can they tangibly restructure this country? So let's listen to what he said.
A lot of people are believing that where we can achieve the establishment, at least a legislation for the establishment of a state police before the election. Something can happen with the restructuring, especially regarding the devolution of powers. Remember, in the last effort, constitutional amendment, it was one of the issues that we looked at, and they came up with a number of items that could be moved from exclusive list to a concurrent list. Now, unfortunately, most of our colleagues did not support it. They didn't support it not because they didn't like it, but because there were pressures from where they come from. There were fears that they're going to lose certain things and all that. So, and then, of course, they voted against it. Now, but we've had time to review it with our colleagues and explain to them how it's going to be a win-win situation for everybody. And so that is the continual dialogue we are engaging our people, and it's beginning again to make meaning to them. So if we're able to build sufficient consensus before the election, I can't see any reason why we cannot take some matters from the exclusive list to the concurrent list.
Senator, what do you say to critics that say that, look, you know, the constitutional amendments are fantastic, they're good, but they're just not enough? They say that, you know, this bit-by-bit incremental approach is not the kind of restructuring that the nation needs, that it needs surgery instead of Band-Aid.
I know.
What are your thoughts about that? And is it even achievable within our current democratic context to have a radical restructuring kind of surgery, if you will?
First of all, I agree with this, not achievable, but it can be achieved. It's not achievable because under our Constitution, Section 9 is talking about alteration of the constitutional sections. You can only alter certain sections of the Constitution. So you can't have a wholesale amendment of an entire Constitution. We can't have that, we can't bring about a new Constitution. So what we can do, which I've also advocated, I came up with a template. Again, it was defeated out of fear. Maybe some other time I explain to you what happened. But the problem is that under Section 9 of the Constitution, you can only amend the Constitution. You can't bring about a new Constitution. So if you want to do a whole new Constitution, first you have to amend the Constitution, especially Section 9, to provide for how the new Constitution can come into force. And then that will be signed into law. Then that should be the foundation. Countries have done that, including Kenya, Zimbabwe, and I believe Brazil.
In your view, within a 4-year dispensation, can this be achieved given the level of political tension that we have seen between parties, between branches of government, etc.?
You see, the problem, I have to admit, is that all the constitutional amendment effort we've had has been the initiative of the Parliament. I'm sorry to say this. The executive had not shown sufficient interest in amending our constitution, or even in constitutional development. So that's why sometimes we finish this, spend a lot of money, we send it to the executive, they don't sign it. Right? Because they don't feel the pains. So some of them are benefiting from the system as it is. They don't want to change. So we need a federal government and state government that can realize the need for us to make progress, to reform our system. Not for them, not because of them, but in spite of them. And basically because of our children, the future, and what others think about us. So once we have that level of patriotism, we can now sit down and agree that this needs to be changed. Now, if we do that, what law requires, you have to have votes in the Senate and the House. You require 2/3, and in some instances 4/5. So it's something you can do in a day. Then you go to state assemblies, you require a simple majority in 2/3 of the states. You can do it the next day. You can amend the Constitution in 1 week. When Yar'Adua was ill, the issue of the fact his continued absence was an issue. We came up with doctrine of necessity that allowed Jonathan to take over. It wasn't in our Constitution. Now, we decided to amend the Constitution to reflect that changes we've made. It took us